Imagine looking at your bank account screen. The logo is correct. The URL is secure. The green padlock rests in the corner, a digital promise of safety. You type in your password, check your balance, and log out, feeling completely secure. You have no idea that your reality has just been hijacked. You have no idea that the screen you saw was a flawless hallucination, painted over your browser by a silent predator. By the time you sleep, your savings are gone, transferred through a labyrinth of offshore servers and eventually injected into the impoverished streets of Palestine and rural Africa.
This was the terrifying reality for millions. In the early 2010s, the global financial system, a behemoth guarded by billions of dollars in cybersecurity, was brought to its knees. Not by a hostile nation-state, not by an army of mercenaries, but by a 24-year-old Algerian man with a laptop, a brilliant mind, and a chillingly calm demeanor. His name was Hamza Bendelladj, though the digital underworld knew him simply as BX1. He would go down in history not just as one of the most prolific cybercriminals of the modern era, but as the smiling hacker.
To understand the sheer magnitude of this asymmetrical warfare, you have to understand the weapon he used to dismantle the financial fortresses of the world. It was a masterpiece of malicious engineering known as SpyEye. SpyEye was not a simple virus. It was a parasitic organism, a weaponized suite of code designed to terrorize the banking sector. Bendelladj did not just use SpyEye, he perfected it, automated it, and unleashed it on a scale that left cybersecurity experts paralyzed.
The genius of his campaign lay in 5 core technical execution methods, each more devastating than the last. First was the concept of the botnet command and control infrastructure. Bendelladj did not attack banks directly. That would be suicide. Instead, he enslaved over 50 million individual computers worldwide, turning innocent home networks and corporate desktops into a massive, silent army of zombies. Through a centralized command server, he could whisper a single instruction, and millions of infected machines would execute it simultaneously. He was a ghost, orchestrating a global symphony of theft.
The second, and arguably most terrifying technique, was the web inject. When an infected user navigated to their bank's website, SpyEye would detect the URL in milliseconds. Before the browser could even render the page, the malware intercepted the web traffic and injected its own fraudulent code directly into the HTML. To the user, the website looked absolutely authentic, but underneath, extra data fields were added, perhaps asking for a mother's maiden name, a social security number, or an ATM PIN. The bank's static defenses saw nothing wrong because the compromise was happening directly on the victim's retinas.
Third was form grabbing. Banks rely on heavy encryption, scrambling your data the moment you hit the login button. Trying to crack that encryption in transit is nearly impossible. Bendelladj knew this, so he bypassed the encryption entirely. Form grabbing acts like a wiretap placed directly on your vocal cords before you even speak. SpyEye hooked deeply into the browser's application programming interface, capturing the user's raw login credentials the exact millisecond they were typed, putting text right out of the browser's memory before the security protocols could even wake up. Fourth was the deployment of kernel-level key logging. If web injects and form grabbing failed, the phantom observer was always watching. SpyEye buried itself into the deepest, most privileged ring of the operating system. It recorded every single keystroke made on the hardware level. Passwords, private emails, corporate communications, everything was quietly compiled into encrypted logs and smuggled out through the back door during off-peak hours, ensuring the network traffic spikes went unnoticed by IT administrators.
Finally, the masterstroke was his automated clearinghouse manipulation. Stealing passwords is one thing, but extracting fiat currency from a heavily monitored financial institution requires a different level of audacity. Bendelladj automated the extraction process. Once an account was compromised, the malware would silently initiate wire transfers in the background, keeping the amounts just below the threshold that would trigger anti-fraud alerts. To prevent the victim from noticing, the malware would alter the victim's visible bank balance on their screen, hiding the missing funds. The victim thought they had $10,000. The bank knew they had zero.
How did the global financial elite allow this to happen? What was the fatal flaw that permitted one man to siphon over $400 million from 217 different banks? It was an arrogant reliance on static security. The corporate giants believed that having expensive, signature-based antivirus software and strong firewalls was enough. They treated cybersecurity as a perimeter defense, building higher digital walls. But Bendelladj did not climb the walls. He walked right through the front door, carried in by the most vulnerable component of any system, human psychology. A tired accounting clerk clicking a seemingly harmless PDF invoice. A manager downloading a fake software update. The systems were technically robust, but human gullibility was the unlocked side door that doomed the entire architecture.
The numbers are staggering to comprehend. 217 banks compromised, over 50 million computers infected, an estimated $400 million evaporated into the digital ether. At the height of his operation, entire departments of global financial institutions were paralyzed, spending countless hours and millions of dollars just trying to scrub their networks clean, only to realize the ghost was already gone.
But what elevates this narrative from a simple story of greed into a complex modern myth is what happened to the money. Hamza Bendelladj did not buy fleets of hypercars or build mega mansions. The staggering wealth he extracted from the arteries of Western capitalism was quietly redirected. Millions upon millions of dollars were funneled through untraceable crypto tumblers and decentralized networks, ultimately landing in the hands of Palestinian charities and starving communities across Africa. He was funding hospitals, orphanages, and basic infrastructure for people who had been entirely forgotten by the very financial systems he was bleeding dry. To the FBI, he was a top-tier cyber terrorist. To the streets of Algiers and Gaza, he was a digital Robin Hood, a lone crusader who weaponized code to balance the scales of global inequality. Yet, no matter how noble the motive, you cannot steal $500 million from the world's most powerful institutions without waking the dragons. The FBI, working alongside Interpol and international intelligence agencies, launched one of the most exhaustive digital manhunts in history. They could not trace the stolen money. They could not penetrate the encrypted botnets. But they knew one thing: even ghosts leave footprints. The downfall of Hamza Bendelladj was not a failure of his code. It was a failure of his ego. It was an amateur, almost ironic slip-up that unraveled his empire. He was arrogant. Under his alias BX1, he frequented Darkcode, the most notorious underground cybercriminal forum on the dark web. He wasn't just using SpyEye, he was selling modules of it, offering customer support to other hackers, and bragging about his exploits. He felt untouchable. The FBI infiltrated Darkcode. Undercover agents spent months building a reputation, eventually making direct contact with BX1. They negotiated the purchase of a customized version of the SpyEye malware for $8,500. In a moment of sheer hubris, Bendelladj sent the malware to the undercover agent. But the transaction left a microscopic breadcrumb. Over time, investigators pieced together fragmented IP addresses from his forum logins, matching them to a specific server he had rented to host the malware files.
The fatal flaw, the truly amateur mistake, was that in the vast, complex web of dummy emails, proxy servers, and encrypted tunnels he built, he occasionally used an email address for his illicit server rentals that was loosely connected to a social media account. A social media account that occasionally pinged an IP address in Algeria. The ghost had a shadow, and the FBI finally had a geographic location.
But they couldn't arrest him in Algeria. The country had no extradition treaty with the United States. He was safe as long as he stayed within those borders. The authorities laid a trap, waiting with agonizing patience for the target to move. They monitored flight manifests globally, waiting for the name Hamza Bendelladj to appear. In January 2013, the waiting paid off. Bendelladj decided to take a vacation. He booked a commercial flight from Malaysia, transiting through Bangkok, Thailand, en route to Egypt. It was a mundane, ordinary travel decision that would end his reign forever. As he stepped off the plane at Suvarnabhumi Airport, entirely unaware of the invisible net closing around him, Thai cyber police and international agents swarmed.
The moment of the arrest was captured on camera, producing an image that would be burned into the annals of true crime history. Surrounded by heavily armed guards, facing a lifetime in a maximum security prison, Hamza Bendelladj looked directly at the cameras, and he smiled. A wide, bright, genuinely joyful smile. It was a smile that infuriated the authorities. It was a smile that mocked the billions of dollars spent trying to stop him. In that single expression, he communicated a profound and chilling truth. He knew it was over for him, but he also knew he had already won. The $400 million were gone, distributed to the poor, beyond the reach of any government asset forfeiture. He had proven that a single individual from a developing nation could single-handedly strip bare the illusion of security maintained by the masters of the universe.
He was extradited to the United States, facing trial in Atlanta, Georgia. The courtroom was devoid of the theatricality of his crimes, just cold, hard legal proceedings. He pleaded guilty, fully acknowledging his actions, and was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The system had finally caught the man, but they could not erase the myth. The legacy of the smiling hacker forces a deeply uncomfortable philosophical reflection. We build our modern lives on a foundation of digital trust. We believe that massive institutions, guarded by the brightest minds and the most expensive technology, are impenetrable. But Hamza Bendelladj proved that the global power structure is incredibly fragile. The asymmetry of the digital age means that absolute power no longer resides solely in armies or vaults. It resides in the minds of those who understand the code. One man, sitting alone in a dark room, dismantled the giants, terrorized the elite, and rewrote the rules of wealth redistribution.
The next time you log into your bank and you see that secure green padlock, remember the ghost in the machine. Remember the 24-year-old who pulled back the curtain to reveal how fragile it all truly is. The systems we trust implicitly, filing hacker is already typing.